Hello, good people, and welcome to Authentic Encounters, Lena Speaks. I'm Lena Morris, the CEO and founder of Authentic Encounters. I am so excited that you have decided to join us for our first time podcast. Authentic Encounters, Lena Speaks is geared toward CEOs, C-suite executives, and high-performing leaders. You might say to yourself, Lena, I am not a CEO, I am not a C-suite executive, but I am a high-performing professional, or I desire to be. Then this is your spot. This is where you're welcome. And here is where you'll get the tools and resources to continue to do that deeper work. If you are someone who wants to do that deeper work and you want to show up and have greater impact, and the encounters that you have in your everyday spaces and places, you want those to really count and to matter, this is the podcast for you. This is the space for you. Now, I could not think of any better first-time guest than Kisha Wynter. Kisha Wynter is the CEO and founder of Wynter Rich Enterprises. She is an executive coach, and she is also a speaker and author. Kisha, thank you so much for joining us for our first podcast. All right. Welcome, Kisha Wynter. And listen, Kisha, I'm super excited today, as I stated before, that we get to have this conversation about why identity shapes every leadership decision. I could think of no one better than you to be my first podcast guest, number one, because you are authentic. You do help people realize their identity across many different environments, whether it's professionally, just in life in and of itself. And I'm super excited for you to be here, my friend. So let's just jump in and begin to share where you feel comfortable at.
I'm excited to be your first guest. I feel like this is a great privilege, and I'm happy to have this conversation with you, Lena.
Good. So when we start talking about identity shapes everything in leadership decisions, right? Talk to me about what you're seeing in leaders who know and who are self-aware about themselves, and then leaders who are not.
Yeah, I think the first thing is that identity really determines whether you as a leader, you're responding consciously or you're reacting to old negative patterns, right? I have this perfect example where I had a leader who earlier on in his career, he's in the technology space. And he was in a leadership development program that I was a senior HR leader for. And he was not promoted to the executive level. And years later, he became C-suite. And he started to really try to prove to his team, to the old people he used to work with, people in the organization, that he was technical enough. That was the reason he wasn't promoted. He had a cybersecurity background and he had this insecurity throughout his career because of that one decision early in his career that they weren't holding him and seeing him as technical enough. And now he was at a C-suite role. Obviously, he had been promoted many times through his career at that point, but he had this old belief system and this old pattern that I don't quite measure up, even though his experience showed that. Like, dude, like you're now CIO of an entire company. But because of that, he didn't see himself at that level. So what it caused him to begin to operate at the tactical level. And it really inhibited him from really setting the vision, or at least leading from vision and really being the culture architect that he was supposed to be in the organization. As a C-suite, even though he kept on seeing himself as this early career professional that had to keep proving himself.
And I often see that as a struggle for leaders, right? They no longer know how to identify themselves. And then we hear this word so many times, but it's so true. Imposter, right?
Imposter.
Yes, because we're giving ourselves the wrong story. And nobody has helped us understand that we once was that person. Yes, we were that person, but now we are in the C-suite. Our leadership responsibilities, our identity, and who we are very crucial for us to understand, for people to follow us, right? So talk to me about imposter syndrome. Talk to me about insecure leaders, because I'm telling you, I've worked for an insecure leader before, and I have often told other leaders the worst, in my opinion, One of the worst leaders to work for is an insecure leader. So, talk to me about your experience in the workplace.
I think I want to separate two things when we talk about imposter syndrome. That insecurity, meaning that you feel that you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you don't belong, shows up in many different ways. We all have some insecurity in our life. It may
Yes.
some of us have it more in the workplace, some of it may have it in different areas of our personal lives, right? And so I think the awareness is there's no shame around it, but the idea is to identify where it's coming from and also where how it's showing up. And so it results in you having a limiting belief about yourself as a leader, and then it ends up having an impact on the people and the culture that you're trying to create in your organization. And I will say, even for me, as a human being, like there are different areas of my life that I'll know imposter will show up. And it shows up for a lot of us in areas that we haven't developed the
Yes.
experience over and over again. It hasn't come second nature. So I tell people imposter syndrome is not something to be avoided. Um, it's something to recognize that it's going to show up because there's something that you haven't dealt with, or maybe even a competency that you haven't mastered. So instead of shying away from it, it's confronting it and saying, okay, where is this coming from? And then you begin to address it. But I do want to separate. There are two things I want to separate, especially as women in the workplace and women of color in the workplace. It's identifying the difference between imposter syndrome and imposter treatment.
Yes.
Imposter treatment is where you work in a toxic environment where the people, the leaders, make you feel as if you don't bring value and you don't belong, and that
Yeah.
is outside of you. And then you now in this situation, now you feel like you have to produce what's the word? Prove yourself.
Yes.
Right. So let's separate that. And that's one of the things I've had to learn as a leader. What are the things that are coming from the inside of me, maybe from my old the way I was brought up and my old belief systems that I have to address? And what are the things that have nothing to do with me and I have to release it? I'm like, well, that's your problem if you think that I
Yes.
don't belong. But I
Yes.
know I belong.
That's good, because that's kinda where we met at, right?
Yes.
I reached out to you, my company reached out to you, because I wanted to begin to move, from, like, the VP role into, C-suite and all that good stuff, and so one of the things that they thought was really good was to, have an executive coach, and this is where our authentic encounter came, and it's been great ever since. It's been
Every
comedy, but it's been great ever since. Um, so we I was already performing and things of that nature. Why don't you give our, viewers a little bit of insight on how we met and, what you brought to my level of development when we met as an executive, as you being my executive coach?
So, what I really love about your example, it's actually a really good example of the purpose of coaching. Because a
Mhm.
lot of times people think coaching is remedial, that I have to
Yes.
fix somebody who is not performing. If I've ever had this, I don't think I've ever coached anyone in my coaching business for the past 5 years. Maybe when I was an HR person, I did this, but all the people that, thank God, all the people that companies send to me are high capacity, high performers. They're not here to try to be fixed. It's not a remedial thing. And so it's really important because somebody like you, and when we did your 360, what came up was that Lena is high capacity, so high capacity to the point that people felt like we're scared she's gonna burn out because she does everything. And even your team, the people that reported to you, felt like they couldn't keep up with you because you were going at 100 miles an hour. Like everything that was thrown to you, you were executing high level on. So this was not an engagement about you not performing. As a matter of fact, I think it was just the opposite. You were over functioning. And so some of the things that we had to work on is really where is that coming from? Because we know you're not going to burn out at this point in time, but this is not sustainable. And two, how can I multiply my impact in the organization, not by me doing the work and me getting it done, but doing it through others? Right. And so, and I think when we met, you actually were not VP yet. Like, you were
Yeah.
director. And
Yes.
through our coaching session, a few months into that, we worked together and you learned to advocate for yourself because you
Yes.
actually were already doing VP work and you
Yes.
were sitting there stuck for such a long time. And I was just like, so let's have a conversation with your organization about not just promoting you, but actually recognizing you for your impact and the work that you were already doing. You were already
Yes.
operating at that level. You weren't asking to be promoted. You were asking to be recognized or, you
Yes.
know, be recognized for the value that you were already bringing. And that's, you know, that's what
Yes.
business is.
And that was also so funny because, we advocated, you taught me how to ask for that substantial raise, and I got that raise because, after they took it to the executive board, they was like, yeah, she's operating at that level. And then shortly after that, I was like, okay, I've been in BP. Listen, I'm like, I'm ready for C-suite, baby. And you were like, what? And so, um, and the reality is, right, since that time, I have gone on, and C-suite didn't come to me through that organization. It did come through me becoming my own CEO and
You
founder of.
promoted yourself.
I promoted myself, baby. But none of that conversation and none of these, steps would have even probably taken place had I not had an executive coach, somebody
Yes.
else to help me change the stories, right? In my head to lock in on. So for a lot of times, like, yes, I know my identity, but there's another layer of identity that we need a coach to help us get to. And oftentimes I keep telling people, yes, you might be self-aware. Because, honey, I know I'm self aware. I know I'm self aware. But there are those limiting beliefs each level of leadership you go into
Yes.
that slow you down if you don't have a coach, right?
Yes.
So, yes, I'm like every level, like when you met me, we pretty much knew, oh, yeah, she's self aware. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like
Right.
when
Right.
after we did the 360, I'm like, yep. Pretty much knew they said they think, I operate at this level and they think I'm a burnout and all that good stuff. I was aware of that. But there was also some other limiting beliefs because I was in that organization. I thought, oh, I need to wait on this. I need to wait on that. And so I really have to say thank you so much for being an effective coach,
Yeah.
and challenging me. There were times you were like, girl. And I was like, okay. I just remember being in a session with you and I was in there with, with my supervisor, and the session got a little heated. You know what I'm saying? And I just
He did.
remember getting a text from you like, simmer down.
And I think it's a really important thing to highlight because the truth is, high performers, and this is what I tell not necessarily the clients I'm working with, but whomever is sponsoring the coaching engagement, is that because I'm not necessarily coaching, for the most part, I'm coaching the individual, not
Yes,
necessarily their boss.
yes,
But the way the coaching engagement is always structured is that in the organization, there is a sponsor and we
yes,
have touch points. We never coach in a vacuum. So we have touch point throughout the coaching process where I'm touching base with whomever the sponsor is. It could be the CHRO for the business, could be actually the CEO, the VP of HR, depending on what the title of the person is I'm coaching. It's bringing awareness that this is a high performer and how you interact with this person that I'm coaching and vice versa is going to be instrumental in terms of the effectiveness of both parties.
yes,
And so one of the things that was happening when we were doing this debrief session, which typically doesn't happen, but it kind of came to a head, is that there was some disagreement, some disconnect that was actually outside of our coaching topic, but it actually surfaced in the touch points.
yeah.
And it got heated. It got really heated. And I was surprised because I didn't expect it. Because you usually are really composed and really
Yeah.
professional. And it's not like you got unprofessional, but
Yeah.
you definitely were much more direct than I expected. So
That's where
I
that
realized,
that's
yeah.
where that authentic encounter showed up, baby. There
Yeah,
was an
yeah, you
authentic
were you were
moment.
definitely being your authentic self, and I was just like, okay, maybe don't be that authentic. So I was like, I realized in the moment, right? This is what a person that can coach not just individual but teams, and I have team coaching background as well. Is I realized that your manager wasn't ready for the level of directness that you were gonna give or you were giving, and it was not gonna be effective. So
Yeah.
in the moment, I texted you and I said, breathe
Yeah.
and tone it. I was actually direct with you because you were being
Yeah.
direct. So I was like, girl, you got to tone
Yeah.
this down
Yeah. Yeah.
if we
Yeah.
want to go anywhere. And so
Yeah.
you composed yourself and we were able to get through the meeting
Yes.
and you were able to have very constructive conversations with,
Yes.
that leader afterwards. But, one of the things about working as a senior leader in organizations is that and you know this as well as a coach, it is that eh, you know, the interpersonal relationship that you have with either your peers, your leaders, your direct reports. And when personalities clash,
Yeah.
that self-management and how you communicate to make that
Yeah.
person's brain receptive to the
Yeah.
feedback that you're giving is really important because you can trigger them
Yeah.
into amygdala hijack, causing the fight
Yeah.
or flight response, or you can actually say things in a way that will make their brain receptive to what you're saying. And knowing the
Yeah.
difference, and that's part of what a coach helps you to do. Because
Yes.
you may
Yes.
not realize that the words that you're using, it may not
Mhm.
be a trigger to you. And so,
Mhm.
and especially if there's cultural difference.
Yeah.
As African Americans, as Black women, we can tend to be much more direct, and
Yes.
not everyone is from that cultural background.
Yeah.
And get them like, girl, this is not gonna work with this leader.
And here's what I think is so funny. One is that we had a great relationship. So that
Yeah,
speaks to
yeah,
your need to really trust and be able to hear the executive coach that you have,
yeah,
because then you can get direct with me and I can hear you and then respond first and foremost. So
yeah.
relationship to your coach is key, in my opinion. Number
Yes.
two, the thing I thought that was really good is even as a coach, I know those things, but I'm still human. And I was like, baby, today I'll put it all online. And then,
I'm like, let's reel it back in.
yes, baby.
And
So,
right?
like,
And that's the difference because even I'm a coach and I have a coach too. Because we all have our blind spot. We all have the things
yeah,
that we have to uncover and become aware of. And that coach is
yes.
that mirror that can help you work through it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that is so key, right? So when we start continue to talk about identity and things of that nature in the workplace, talk to me a little bit more. My big push that I try to talk to leaders about, and I was just on a call with the leader prior to us doing this session, I was talking to them about the essence of being a leader and not just the title of a leader. Because most of the time, people are like, put the word leader on instead of it being the essence of this is who I am. I'm a woman first, leader second. And because I know who I am as a individual, that comes through my leadership.
Yes.
Leadership isn't just a piece of clothing I put on. It is the essence of who I am as a human being first. And then it shows up and I attach these resources, skills, and things of that nature to it. But we are never separate because if I'm leading at work, I'm leading at home, in community, at church, it is the essence of who I am. It's not the title I put on. So talk to us a
Yes.
little bit about that.
I love how you say it's the essence of who I am as a leader. I'll say that really leadership is being clear about who you are, which is where we're talking about identity, the impact that you want to make, right? And the values by which you want to lead. So the impact is tied to your mission, your personal mission for yourself and for your business,
Yes.
as well as the values, what's important to you, right? And that goes back to your essence. You said you put it as essence, but you can't lead without knowing what is my purpose? What's the purpose that I want to drive in my life? Let's forget
Yeah.
the organization, right? You talk about authentic encounters. I know something that's important to you is authenticity, and you
Mhm.
want people to operate not from their false selves when they interact with each other. You want them to operate from their authentic selves and have an encounter based on that authenticity. And
Yes.
that breeds trust, that breeds connection. And that's how you show up with your kids. Cause I even did the 360 and involve your kids. She was just like, I
Yeah.
need you to not just ask. the people at work, but I want my kids.
Yeah.
And your kids are grown men, right? They're
Yeah.
not children. They're
Right.
adults in their 20s.
Yeah.
Um, and so for us, I think we separate leadership from who we are. And really, a leader is part of who you're being. It's
Yes.
how you show up. And the essence of that impacts, it has like a reverberating impact without
Hmm.
you even opening your mouth. So for me, earlier in my career and like naturally in my life, I haven't necessarily, this is my own belief. I had to shift this. Like I'm not naturally going to be the one that wants to take over the room. I might be talking a lot on this podcast and you'll see my articles and I talk a lot.
Yeah.
But naturally I'm not naturally the loudest person in the room. I'm very comfortable, like just sitting back, chill. Unless you say something crazy that goes against my values, and then I'm like, okay, like
Yeah.
let's cut this. But usually, I'm very comfortable sitting calm and in the background, and so I never view myself as a leader. But people around me would come to me all the time, asking me advice, telling them what to do, and it was not necessarily because I was loud, but it's because of the essence that I have.
Yeah.
My essence was I
Hmm.
created a safe space, which is actually part of my mission now. Um, but I created a safe space. People felt the psychological safety so they could come to me and be authentic and have
Yeah.
discussion. But
Yeah.
that was something that I don't know, maybe it was in me from a young person, a
Yeah.
child, to this day. And so now I've leveraged the strength that I've naturally had and I use it in my coaching. And so
Hmm.
understanding that my impact as a leader is going to be different from your impact, but knowing what that differentiator is, using it to your advantage and tying it to a bigger mission and purpose is what I say is part of your leadership essence.
Yes. And that's what I like the most, right? It is knowing who you are when you're at a certain stage. So we don't all come out and know our identity. This is life, like, this is a lifelong lesson, and we're constantly learning who we are at each stage of development. And when I mean development, I don't just mean in the workplace, I mean in life,
Life
every stage. I know, girl. Okay, say it, girl, in
and
life.
life.
Let's be honest. I'm at a different stage in life, and my boys are 22 now. 22-year-old twins, and I still parent them, not like helicopter parent. But the other day, I was like, "Whoa, these emotional talks, baby. Let's go back to daycare talks, baby, because this right
Okay.
here."
Okay.
Listen. But my identity in as parenting, as a parent, I understand I'm still leading, and the way I lead is differently,
Yes.
right? So the way I lead is different. And I often tell people that as you get promoted in your career, make sure you're able to sit in the seat that you go after,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Yes, because there's a certain level of behavior and expectation, not only business acumen, but a level of professional maturity and insight that require you to show up differently according to the level of the organization that you're in. And baby, I usually tell people, if you cannot pay the price of leadership because you don't get it from the goodwill, baby. You know what I'm
Yes.
saying? You
It's
don't
in
get it
the
half price.
trenches.
Yes.
It's developed in the trenches, and it's really important. I love you made that point because at every stage, every role that you're in, you have to be able to assess what does this role require of me in
Yes.
terms of who I am being first. Like we go, right, what do I have to do? What's the job responsibility? No.
Yes.
It starts with what is the mindset and who do I need to be in order to be effective in this role. And from
Mhm.
that place of being comes the action, the doing,
Yes.
right? We go right back to that insecurity. And the thing is about it is when you're in one role, it may require a different skill set. It may require
Mhm.
a different mindset than the new role that you're in. And so
Yes.
that's part of the power of coaching. It's actually to take the things that, because typically we go into new situations with our old scripts and our
Yes.
old patterns. And we have to realize that there is a new order that needs to, like, the way, like, that leader that I talked about before earlier in the podcast was used to showing up at some point after he didn't get promoted. He was proving himself, proving himself. You may be C-suite. When you're C-suite, you are not the star of the show, actually.
Yes.
You may be responsible and the most responsible one for the outcome, but the star of the show should be your senior leaders, and it should be the
Yes.
employees underneath them, because they're actually the ones responsible for executing and doing the work. You're responsible for creating the environment that is going to make them operate at their highest capacity.
I often say this, if you don't have the integrity to know the difference between I'm ready for this seat or not, then you need a coach, right?
Yes.
You need a coach.
Yes.
The other thing too is if you're not willing to sacrifice, like there's a sacrifice, when it comes to uh, certain levels of leadership and understanding like I'm willing to pay the price or not. This is a time that I'm willing to pay the price and this is a time I'm not. Like I said, I was talking to a client and this person, one of the responsibility is if you sit at this level of the organization, then you're required to give this much to the campaign. If you're not willing to give that much to the campaign, then you're not ready to sit in that seat in the organization.
And that may be not only a reflection of, as most times it's not usually a reflection of your ability.
Yeah.
It may be a reflection of many different things. So, for example, there are leaders at one point in their career, they were willing to pick up their whole family, relocate, usually from the US to another country, and to become an expat. That is a major life shift and
Yeah.
change. I would talk to these executives, their husbands or their wives, depending on who was moving. And it was a big shock for the family, right?
Yeah.
So this is one example. And so at some point in that person's career, they were willing to move their 5-year-old and their 7-year-old to a brand new country to take that chief financial officer role of, let's say, Brazil.
Yes.
And it was a great experience for the children. They learned a new language. The leader was able to operate on a global level. The spouse may not have loved it initially, but eventually did. And then I've had those same leaders 10 years later. The 5-year-old is now a 15-year-old and a
Yeah.
16-year-old, and that is a big shift for that age group. And they're like, you know what? This next opportunity that I have to now it's not Brazil. They want to move me to the UK, but this is going to be disruptive to my child, and it's going to negatively impact the relationships in my household. And so I am not willing at this point, no matter what, for what dollar amounts, where I am in my life with my children and with my spouse, it's not the sacrifice I'm willing to make right now. But for you, that was the best decision, not just for your career, but for your entire life. So this is
Yeah.
why the identity of understanding where you are now, because the identity and where you are now may be different from where you were 10 years ago or even last
Yeah.
week.
Yes.
And if you don't know what your value is, what your mission
Yes.
is, what is most important to you, you're going to allow the organization or other people to dictate,
Yes.
and you're not going to feel fulfilled, and there could be such a negative impact. So I think it's really important to, again, be real and be really grounded in whether or not this next move is right for you right
Yeah.
now.
Yes, and that is so funny because I just remember when I was putting my 2 weeks in, at my previous organization, the CEO was like, "Well, what about the mission?" And I just laughed because I was like, "The mission? I am the mission. I wake up." You know what I'm saying? I wake up with
Yes.
mission every day. Like my identity isn't tied to this organization and my
Right.
identity is not tied to this position. Although I loved it and I spent my time there, I outgrew it. And there was nothing wrong about that, right? I
Nothing.
knew I knew I outgrew it, but the fact that you felt like I wouldn't till the next day when I woke up, I wouldn't know what my mission, purpose, and calling was. I was just I laughed, but in a lot of ways, I shouldn't because I do get to talk to a number of executives and employees who separate from an organization, and that was all they knew about themselves, and they defined themselves
Yes.
through that. And
Yes.
so then they're lost. They're lost because they don't know who they are apart from that organization. Whereas
Yes.
I've been fortunate enough, right, to know pretty much not only in my last organization, pretty much since I was out of college, that wherever I went, my mission went with me, and it just had to align with the organization, and I had to find ways for it to align and play out in those organizations. But no matter where I went to, and this is more than just transferable skills. Transferable skills are great, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But the mission, the value, your identity, who you are, irregardless of the environment, whether I'm a professional at work in the workplace, I'm a mother at home, I'm a leader in the community, and I'm serving at church, right? I lead from my identity. I lead
Yes.
from whom I am. So I just thought that was so hilarious. He's like, "What about the mission?" I'm like, "Honey, I don't know
It's
about
like
what's
I
important
have
for
a
you."
mission, and I
Yeah.
am the mission. I love that. And when you were talking, it reminds me of this consistent topic that we hear from people in the C-suite and actually throughout all levels. It's this idea of leadership presence or
Mhm.
executive presence.
Yeah.
And it seems like such a mystical thing that nobody can really describe. And
Right.
what we were talking about, purpose, mission, value, knowing who
Mhm.
you are is actually such a key component of what that presence is and being grounded in that. Because the truth is, we all have presence. Like, presence is the energy that you bring into a room, and whether or not how you show up signals authority, signals
Yes.
that people like this is the person to follow, right? But the most powerful thing is being internally aligned,
Yes.
right? When you are internally aligned, people feel that energetically. Like you're
Absolutely.
speaking from assurance, you're speaking
Yes.
from conviction, you're speaking from clarity that cannot be faked.
Yeah.
And so I say to people all the time, like, you have to know what your personal value, your purpose, mission, what impact that you want to make. And then you choose the type of organization that you want to work with in that is aligned to that. Because
Yes.
when there is alignment, the friction and the trying hard goes
Yes.
away. It evaporates because now you're not no longer operating in friction, but you're flowing in your
Mhm.
innate genius because you are aligned with an organization that is the right fit for who you are being at that moment. I have a book, right, called Your Power Unleashed. But one of the chapters in my book, chapter 4, or actually chapter 3, I talk about values and doing internal purpose and values work so
Mhm.
that you can show up in that power and show up authentically, living according
Yes.
the life that you want to live.
Yes. And it's so important that you talk about those tangible tools, right? So the tangible tools are the values. There's an exercise for that. The 360, it's a tool,
Yes,
right?
yes, yes,
Strengths and different things like that. I often tell people you need data to give words to what you're living out. Sometimes you're living it out, but if you cannot identify it, it is hard for you to grow and learn from it and to build repeatable patterns that help you show up the way you want to intentionally show up. So talk to us about some of the tools that you use to help leaders further uncover their authentic, identity.
yeah, I love that. Now, in terms of, and I'm gonna throw out some tools, but also I have a framework, right? So the
Yes.
first tool you and I share in common, obviously the 360 is the data, and it's
Yes.
my favorite. It's the best because what we do is we do qualitative interviews with your key stakeholders. 360, which means it includes your leaders, the people who are above you, your peers, the people who report to you, your clients, internal and external, depending on your level. It could even be your board of directors. We want to
Yes.
see, based on the data, how you're showing up and your impact with all your key stakeholders. If you're great with your team, you manage your team, you're inspirational, but your leaders, don't think you're operating at the level you should be operating at, being a strategic thinker, being an enterprise wide impact. If your external clients don't see, there's going to be impact. So one is the 360. Then we do assessments such as the EQI. I love the EQI 2.0. It's the emotional intelligence test that's broken up in different composites. The third thing I use is an assessment called the Hogan assessments. But for me, I have different frameworks and processes that I use to help my clients really break through and move from what they feel like is their authentic selves, but actually reconnect to that authentic self and remove those hidden performance inhibitors or
Yes.
legacy beliefs that stop them from being effective.
Okay.
So it's not about, I'm no longer the star of the show, as they say, the sage from the stage.
Yeah.
I need to be the guide from the side. I need to be the multiplier of talent. You may get insights from the coach or
Mhm.
insights from thinking, because the coach is your thought partner, not just someone telling you to do something. So now that we've identified that, between now and the next coaching call and the next coaching call, what are some actions are you going to try in these real world circumstances that's going to allow you to be more effective? What mindset shifts? How did that person show up? How did they develop? How did they grow? Now that you stepped out of the doing, and what space did you create that allowed you to think at a new level, right? That's where coaching hits the real world, is that you have the
Yes.
insights, you surface the beliefs, but now you're giving the tactical challenges and experimentation that they're doing the new things. And from the action that they're taking, that's actually where transformation happens,
Yes.
right?
Yes. And that's why it's so important with people. And so, like, our tagline at Authentic Encounters is from training to transformation. And generally, I do not let organizations just book once with me because I'm like, yeah, we can have an encounter, but I want to go from training to transformation. Same thing.
Transformation.
That's right. The same thing with coaching. You have got to have a consistent setup with your coach so you can remap that, right? That's that neuroplasticity, right? You got to remap.
Neuroplasticity.
Yes, you got to remap those, your brain to now do the new behavior. And yes, it's going to feel uncomfortable the first few times you do it, but that's why you got a coach. And that's why you got to keep doing it, right? And
And
that's
the
why you got to keep showing
transformation
up.
happens in discomfort, because if you're uncomfortable, Lena, you know
Mhm.
this. You know that there is new synapses. So we talk about
Yep.
neuroscience that's being connected.
Yep.
And they say neurons that fire together, wire together. Then you've developed it. You worked with us for 6 months to a year. And now at the end of the process, you've transformed.
Yes, and I have to teach, and that's why I tell people all the time. And you have to make time to do the development. They can't be like, "Well, work got in the way." This is a part of the work. Coaching is part of the work. Trying it out is part of the work. You can't just flake on your coach every time you turn around because I'm like, listen, we are shaping and building a new identity. We're continuously discovering who we are as a leader, the essence of who we are, and that takes time. Any relationship that you're building, even the one you're building with yourself, it takes intentional time, right? And so I often tell people this too. They'll be like, I got these tools in coaching, or I got these tools in the training. Right. And I tell people they work if you work them. They work
Yes,
if you work them. If you're not working them, then they're not going to work because you're not creating a consistent pattern. So
you're
your
not.
behaviors can then adapt to the mindset that you've now built. Then the attitude that shapes around that, the behaviors follow, and you get the results that you need. And so when we say that, people think, oh, it's so easy for you. I'm like, no, I'm human just like you. I had to
No,
do the process too. The one thing I like about both of us is we've actually walked the shoes, walked the journey to development where we're at. Unlike now on any platform, people just pop up. You're like, you a coach? You can't. Are you kidding me? But
I'm
I'm
like,
just
you're not a coach. You may
okay.
be a
Yeah.
mentor,
Like,
but you're not a
I
coach.
got listen. I have the scars. To,
Yes.
I have
yes.
the scars to
Yes.
show you where I've had to walk it out to say I have the actual experience where I had to shut the door for myself and run myself through these processes and be like, girl, check in, right? Yeah. And so people don't realize they work if you work them. It's as simple as that. You've got to put the work in for continue to like chisel away to who you are. Cause like you said, even our values, right?
Even
The
our
values I
values.
had when I was younger, right, are not the values I have now when I'm in my 50s.
No.
I turned 50 last year. I'm proud to say that. Whoop, whoop.
Okay, congratulations. I'm right
Okay,
behind
you
you.
know, but the woman I am at 50 is certainly not the woman I was when I entered the workforce. You know what I'm saying?
Yes,
And
yeah.
so,
Thank God.
thank God. Listen. Now, listen. The authentic part has always followed me. Like we can
Always,
date that back
yes.
to kindergarten,
Yeah,
but how
yeah,
that
yeah.
authenticity comes through
Shows
and
up.
how people
There's a
encounter me
maturity.
has been shaped, and it's been shaped by a coach, right? So this is what I would like to say. I have so enjoyed our conversation today. And Kisha, as you think about identities and leaders and 2026, the workplace of 2026, and how leaders are showing up in the organizations that you're working with, what is a level of information, encouragement, or advice you would give to them?
We talked a lot about neuroplasticity just now, right? I say neuroplasticity is, another word for hope.
Yeah.
What does that mean? You may look at yourself and say, okay, I am at the C suite already, but I have some patterns that are inhibiting me or stopping me from performing at my highest level. I say plasticity is a synonym for hope because no matter where you're starting at, if you put in the work like we did, right? And that we do
Mhm.
with our clients, sh- really partnering with somebody else, a coach, hopefully one of us, or somebody else that is a competent coach that you can transform into the effective leader that you want to be. Transformation is possible. You just have to have the right process and the right tools. And I'll end with this story. I had a call right before today with one of my coaching clients. She was a prior CFO of an organization and she's operating in a senior executive role right now. And for this person, their nervous system was so dysregulated. It was impacting not just her leadership at work with her leaders as well as her teams, but at home with her children. And we had a conversation, a light bulb moment in coaching. And I said to her, you are a heart centered leader, but your impact is devastating compared to the intent that you want to have in terms of there's a separation between the intent and the impact. And it was such a blind spot for her. I had to hold up the mirror and show her that her impact was actually very negative on her team, even though she wanted it to be positive.
Mhm.
And in a matter of months, she has shown us she still has the same level of workload, the same
Mhm.
level of stress coming at her, but the way is showing up, she's much more grounded, confident, and calm. In 3 months, that transformation happened because she had a coach that was willing to tell her the truth, to give her
Mhm.
hold up the mirror. She was willing to do the work. We created some new systems and some new habits. You can transform and you can change and improve as a leader if you have the right support system and if you're really ready to put in the work.
Awesome. So thank you for being our first time guest. I'm super excited. I believe we've had a very transformative conversation today. And to those who are viewing this content, tell them where they can contact you, reach out, find your book, and all that good stuff.
I love it. So I'm glad you said that. My book is Your Power Unleashed and all the things we're talking about, unleashing your potential. It's available on Amazon. And my website is the same thing, yourpowerunleashed.com. You can find me as Kisha Wynter, Wynter, on LinkedIn and all social media platforms.
All right. Thank you so much. And until next time, I hope you are having a great day and spending it with the people that matter the most.